Number sequence 1, 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, 5, 1 equals 1, or it equals 10, and then you go to 1. The elevator game. Here we go. During all of the following, if someone gets on the elevator, game's over, you have to start over, except on the 5th floor and only one person. Do not proceed and have to start over. Also, if someone interrupts the process by having the elevator go to a floor you didn't pick. You start on the 1st floor or go to the 1st floor in an elevator. You let the doors open, and then you after they're fully open, hit the numbers sequence like this. Press 4 to go to the 4th floor, 2 to go to the 2nd floor, 6 to go to the 6th floor, 2 to go to the 2nd floor again, 10 to go to the 10th floor, and then 5 to go to the 5th floor. On arrival, totally ignore anyone that might get on, but it can only be one individual, usually female, in the story. And then you can proceed. You press 1. At this point, if it goes to the 1st floor, no matter what happens, leave the building, make a note on your list, there's a reason for this, elevator inspector joke here, and you list it as being a normal building, not something unusual. Yes, I gave you a clue where this came from. Next, if it goes to the 10th floor, and I'm going to add in, or the basement, stay on the elevator. Don't stick your head out. Press floor 1 to go to the 1st floor. Do it over and over again, only floor 1, to get it to floor 1, to show that it can go to floor 1. Leave the building outright and mark it down as being not normal for the elevators. Add it to the list of access point buildings to another dimension if you want. Make note of any red cross outside of any window, or a blackened environment with nobody on the floor, with a red light in the distance, usually in the form of a cross, on any floor at all, especially if on the way down to the 1st floor it randomly opens at different floors and they're all blacked out or something. Or it says it's on the floor, but it doesn't look right. I already gave you a clue as to where this came from, but let's discuss the history of elevators really quickly. 1880, the first electric version of elevators existed being built. By 1884, automatic safety doors were added, and other improvements were made so that the thing would not open unless it was absolutely necessary. And if somebody stopped it from closing, it wouldn't let the elevator work. Japan's first electric elevator only existed in 1890 first, and it only did 8 floors for safety reasons. That gives you an idea of where some of the number limits might come in here. First elevator in India was 2 years later. By 1895, automatic operation for floor control, acceleration, etc. was added. By 1900, completely automated elevators started to replace the old ones, and by 1920, they were being replaced almost entirely. By 1922, New York City finally allowed self-service or automatic elevators because up to that point, rheostat manually controlled elevator motor operator was still the legal definition and job. You only go up and down. It has it up and down, but that's their job. By 1940, all of them had been replaced and or there was a strike, and the need for emergency stop button and telephones existed because almost no elevators were operated by anybody. And this was for unattended operation, and they were trusted with people's lives. This also was to reduce public fears of taking an elevator. I want to point out that before that, there were some well-publicized incidents. Also, people getting on an elevator as the doors close and then they open, all they notice if the operator and or the elevator is working, doing the job correctly, you don't notice any movement. You just notice that you get into this magic box, the doors close, and then they open, and you're in a completely different environment. See also that the penthouse might have a surrounded elevator, meaning you'd get out and you'd be in a little box and you could walk around it with a door on it. The opposite of what you saw before. You know, it might also come up to a floor and there'd be a party because it wasn't a standard floor. Or you could end up in the basement with pitch black darkness except for red guidance lights in the distance. It might be around a corner that might look like a line or whatever if you first looked at it by it reflecting off of walls that were sometimes wet or matte colored, matte black, because they were dirt walls. That's actually something that happened in some buildings. Or you might be on a building that's been just shut down, like the 13th floor in 85% of the buildings that doesn't exist at one time, that would be used for storage only by the people who ran the building. You might think you're going to the 5th floor, and then it's pitch black. And you can't tell whether or not it's pitch black. Really, you look outside of the elevator, you can't tell if you're just looking into the abyss. Average elevator travel is only 4 to 5 stories, so many elevators at one time only went up 10 floors. Now, electrically, what that was 10 floors, but 1 through 9. 0 was the basement, depending on the configuration. Now, if you were to add to the panel and you were running mass-produced panels for these things, they're in 3 by whatever matrices, not 4 by. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 requires another panel set. The wiring for it might cause you, especially if you start with 0 through 9 instead of 1 through 10, like I'm talking about, it's 0 through 9. B is basement or whatever. If you hit 1 and went to 10, that would be weird. But if you hit 10, it might electrically equal 1 and 0. You might end up in basement, black environment, no light except for a red light for guidance so that you could try to get to the light switch, or a storage room. Or it could just randomly pick the wrong floor. And if it went to 10, that's mathematically the overrun, or it's a math issue. These were all based on relay logic and analog electromechanical systems, or, God help us, rheostats like the operator would use. And because of that, if they made a mistake, you might get some numerical value out of it, or it might just randomly take you to a floor. Also, some buildings, if you're at the 5th floor, you're halfway between 10 and 1, mathematically. So it might say, well, I have people on 10th floor hitting the button rapidly. So it'd go up to the 10th floor, pick up people, and just go down, because that's the most efficient pattern. Japan and many other countries have populations that live a very long life and never got used to newer technology, or adapted rapidly, or saw the pains and agony of it changing over time, like, seeing elevators that would do something more terrifying than falling. The only thing worse than sticking your head out through an elevator between the two surfaces that could pass each other, the only thing worse than it falling, which means you bop your head and be thrown back into the elevator, is having the elevator go uphill, hit you on the back of the head, throw you to the ground, and chop you into 2 pieces as the bottom of the elevator pushes up on the ceiling or the top edge of the doorway and cuts you off and you fall to the ground. Yes, there is something worse than the elevator falling. Next, most elevators are counterbalanced to where if they don't have a load and all the brakes pop, they go uphill. They don't go uphill with a huge amount of force, by the way. That's a bullshit thing. And, again, decades, literally from 1920 to 1940s and even 1950s, people scared of it. Next, your average kid entering an elevator uninitiated with nothing explained just sees the world change and wonders, is this a new universe? Is this the same world we were in? Or worse, you're in a building where all the floors look almost the same, and you can't tell what floor you're on. This is kind of spooky for our, dumb brain parts, especially. Where did this story come from? Number one, if you're not aware of these procedures, this is sometimes called the developer mode on a calculator or a computer, or the secret handshake or whatever, or the Vulcan death pinch. Many electronic and electrical equipment has what you might call an Easter egg, but it's for putting the piece of equipment into test mode. You test an elevator by doing crazy crap with it, like making the motors run way too fast. You don't do it when you're in it normally, but you can. Also, many elevators have an express speed button. Also, an electrical panel short out sometimes freaks people out because it'll drop or escalate faster than you would like it to. And again, some of them move so smoothly you can't tell you've gone from one floor to another. And it's a freaky experience, especially if you have an operator running it. Now, the story originally happened in 2008, and it was done by someone on 5chan. And I have the URL below, but the transliterated version in archive is mode. It's actually archive PH, and it'll either be the C7 version or the H2 version you'll read. It'll be translated into English and you can read it. I'll have a copy of it below, but it's not really important. It's the same thing. The only exception is it tells you how to escape this other mode if you ever really do not just stick your head out of the 10th floor, but actually go into it. If you go to a floor in an elevator and it's pitch black, it's probably a power outage. If you see a red light in the distance or it looks like a cross, it's probably just that. Again, those are probably emergency lights. Do you exit the elevator? No. I'm not being superstitious. Don't stick your head out through the opening of a malfunctioning elevator. hit the button to go to the first floor. And also it says if you hit the first floor and it starts going up to 10th again, hit any other button below number 5 or above number 5, but not number 5 again, to try to get it to stop at the floor and then force it to go number 1 again. You have to get it to go to floor number 1 again. The reason is if it's malfunctioning, you don't want to exit it. That's why they used to have safety phones, emergency buttons, stops, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to cover the elephant in the room, Elisa Lamb. The claim she was doing the elevator game in the elevator. I don't believe it was. It doesn't look like she's hitting the buttons in the right order at all, or any variation of it. Next, no, this doesn't give you a portal to another world. However, yes, if you're on an elevator and it's malfunctioning and it's not built correctly and you stick your head through the opening and it decides to malfunction in a spooky way, you might go to another realm, again, bump on the back of the head, falling across it and being cleaved in half. And yeah, the person who came up with the story was probably an elevator inspector or somebody who knew about the elevator inspector rules, because this is one of the test procedures for elevators that only go up to, quote, the 13th floor. It's to force the thing to go into test mode so you can override any restrictions. And sometimes elevators malfunction and go to a floor that's been locked out, so you end up opening it and it's a stripped floor with the lights off, or go down to the basement or some other thing like maybe the penthouse where you're not supposed to be, and it would be a very jarringly different environment, especially the basement. That's why in many cities it's legally required at the elevator and at the stairwell that the light is always on. And yes, in many cases it's red. And sometimes people don't change it. So yeah, if you see it open up and it's a pitch black environment, close the doors and go to the other floors. But no, it's not a realm transport to another realm. It's just it's an indication you're probably in an elevator you need to get out of. And yeah, the first floor is where you're supposed to go to because it's the ground floor. Get out of just leave it. And also, if you're in LA, the rule was if the elevators are malfunctioning, get out of the building. Don't stay in it, because if it's disrupting the elevator, because that's the core of the building, that means the rest of the building might fall down. Get the hell away from it. That's also part of the rule set that was brought up. But it was only told to people who are engineers and such. And yes, this is actually the procedure in some cities to go test the elevators. You test it without telling the building owner so they don't try to fix anything, so you can see whether or not they're doing their maintenance correctly. And variations of this were used as a hack-in to get the elevator to do things like do express mode, lock out all the floors, make it to where you have total control over it. I know that because I found several Otis elevators in Portland to do that with. Look up elevator hacking and elevator Easter eggs. Most of them are gone now, though. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.